They say that deep in the forest, there's something that isn't an animal, isn't a spirit, and isn't human. Something that moves silently between ancient trees, that breathes with the jungle itself, and only appears when it feels someone has crossed a sacred boundary. Imagine walking down a narrow trail, sunlight flickering through the canopy, when suddenly the birds go silent, the wind stops, the smell of the forest changes, and in that almost supernatural stillness, you feel it. You're not alone. A pair of yellow eyes appears among the dense green. A tall, slender figure, covered in leaves, vines and moss, rises as if it had grown straight out of the earth. And before you even think about running, a deep voice, almost like branches snapping, whispers something that echoes inside your mind. The forest sees everything and protects what is hers. Would you step back, keep walking, or beg for permission to leave that place alive? Because, according to old Brazilian tales, whoever encounters this entity isn't meeting a monster. They're meeting the mother of the forest. And if she appears, it means you've crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The mother of the forest holds a unique place in Brazilian folklore. Unlike well-known figures like Sachi, Iara, or Curupira, she isn't exactly a popular character. Her name rarely shows up in school books, and very few people can clearly describe her. But among indigenous groups, river communities, and residents living deep in the Amazon, the Atlantic forest, and even the Cerrado, her presence is constant, respected, feared, and revered. She's described as an ancient guardian, an entity that existed long before humans stepped on Brazilian soil. Some say she's the mother spirit of nature, protecting plants, animals, and springs from invaders. Others believe she is the forest itself, materialized in feminine form, tall, slender, with skin like living bark, hair made of vines and leaves, and eyes that glow like fire, or like something not from this world. Her mythology has deep roots in indigenous cosmologies, especially in traditions that believe every natural space has an owner or keeper, the keeper of the waters, the keeper of the hunt, the keeper of the winds, and the keeper, or, in this case, guardian of the forest. And despite the variations, all versions agree on one thing. The mother of the forest is not evil, but she is not kind either. She simply protects at any cost. That's why many experienced hunters refuse to enter certain areas of the woods, not because of jaguars, snakes, or falls, but because they know something is watching there, something that doesn't welcome trespassers. Something that decides who enters and who leaves. Put stories involving the mother of the forest are rare, not because she doesn't appear, but because, according to the legends, those who see her clearly almost never return to tell the tale. Still, a few accounts survived, passed down in isolated communities, generation after generation, always with the same warning. Only those chosen to survive can speak of her, the hunter who heard the call. The first story comes from a group of hunters in the interior of Acre. They say a man named Arlindo vanished for 3 days in the forest without leaving a trace. When he finally returned to the village, he was barefoot, shirtless, and covered in scratches, as if the forest itself had carved its mark into his skin. Arlindo didn't speak, didn't answer questions. He only whispered, "I wasn't supposed to be there. She warned me. She warned me." When he eventually recovered his voice, he explained, he was tracking an animal when a heavy silence fell over the forest. The wind died. The birds disappeared. And then he saw a massive figure, almost as tall as a giant tree, moving between the trunks. She didn't walk, Arlindo said. She glided. The entity pointed at him, or at least that's how he understood it, and instantly he felt a crushing pressure in his chest, like an invisible force squeezing him. He fainted from the pain. When he woke up, he was somewhere unfamiliar. The forest looked older, denser, and he swore he heard whispers coming from the trees. It took him 3 full days of walking to find his way back. Arlindo never hunted again, and to this day, no one dares enter the area where he saw the entity. The girl who got lost and was returned. This story is less frightening, but even more mysterious. In 1998, in the interior of Pará, a 6-year-old girl named Jamil disappeared into the forest while playing near her home. Neighbors searched for hours. Nothing. The next morning, Jamil appeared, sitting calmly at her doorstep. Clean, unhurt, not hungry, not cold, not scared. When asked where she had been, she replied, "With the lady of the forest." Her description was chilling. Skin like tree bark hair made of plants, glowing eyes, a voice that sounded like the wind, according to Jamil. The lady held her hand and said, "You don't belong to the dark. I'll take you back to the light." For the locals, there was no doubt. The mother of the forest had protected the child, and they believe it only happened because Jamil didn't enter the woods out of malice or curiosity. She simply got lost, and the mother of the forest protects the innocent, the logger who vanished in front of 3 witnesses. This is the strangest story, and maybe the scariest, because 3 men saw it happen. In 2011, in Mato Grosso, a group of workers was illegally cutting down trees in a protected area. One of them, Renato, was chopping a large tree when he suddenly stopped. He dropped the axe, stared into the thick forest, and said, "She's coming." His co-workers laughed, thinking it was a joke. But before they could say anything, it happened. A strong wind blasted through. A shadow moved between the trees. Dry leaves swirled in circles, as if stirred by invisible fingers. Renato stepped back, but it was too late. The men watched his body get pulled into the forest as if huge hands had grabbed him. No scream, no struggle, no protest, just one sound. Branches snapping. Renato was never found. The story became local legend, reinforcing an old warning repeated by traditional communities, those who harm the forest. The mother of the forest comes to claim, "There are stories that sound like campfire exaggerations, and there are stories that carry a strange, suffocating weight, as if they weren't meant to be repeated." The most famous climax involving the mother of the forest comes from a group of researchers who, in 2007, set out to explore an unmapped region of the Amazon to study centuries-old trees. The team, for biologists, two woodsmen, and a documentarian, planned everything: GPS, mapping radar, drones. But they had no idea they were heading straight into what locals called the sacred zone, a place even animals avoided. On the very first night, something happened. Luis, the documentarian, woke up startled by footsteps outside his tent. They sounded like soft scratches, like branches brushing fabric, except there was a rhythm, a slow, heavy cadence. He unzipped the tent just enough to peek outside. The moon barely pierced the tall canopy, but it was enough to reveal a detail that made his stomach twist. There were circular markings on the ground, thin trunks snapped as if bent by giant hands, and in the very center, nothing, bay hollow, perfect emptiness. The woodman recognized it immediately. It wasn't natural. It was a protection circle, a kind of boundary that, according to them, the mother of the forest uses to warn that no one should cross. "If we break this circle," one of the woodmen said, "the forest responds." But the researchers pressed on anyway. The second day brought strange noises among the trees, branches snapping, footsteps that approached and retreated, deep breathing that echoed like it came from underground. Drones began falling out of the sky without explanation, as if something invisible swatted them down. And then came the night that has never been fully explained. The night of the voice in the trees around 3 a.m. Every flashlight in the camp went out at once. The silence was so heavy even the insects stopped singing. Then a voice, not male, not female, something ancient, low, vibrating like the sound of roots tearing beneath the earth. It spoke a single word: leave. None of the researchers could move. It felt as if a weight was pinning their bodies to the ground. The woodman began praying desperately, whispering words the biologists didn't understand. And then she appeared. First, a pair of eyes, yellow, glowing, blinking slowly. Then a tall, slender silhouette shaped from living wood. Long arms covered in leaves that moved without wind, and skin like the bark of an ancient tree, carved with deep crevices. The researchers say she didn't walk, she glided. The entity approached the circle, etched in the soil, and when one of the biologists, Paulo, stepped back just a single inch, his foot broke the edge of the circle. That was all it took. The wind blasted into the camp. Leaves spiraled into a violent whirl. The trees bent as if pulled by an enormous force. And in the middle of the storm, Paulo was lifted off the ground by something unseen. He screamed only once. The mother of the forest raised her head, observing him with deep, glowing eyes, and carried him into the forest. He vanished into the darkness as if swallowed by the woods. His body was never found. Their equipment remained scattered, and from the few cameras that survived, only one thing was recorded, a whisper carried by the wind. "I protect what is mine." The team evacuated the area immediately, and since that night, no scientific expedition has ever been authorized there again. The mother of the forest isn't a threat. she's a warning. A reminder that there are places that simply aren't meant for us. Places older than any civilization. Places where nature has a voice, a will, and guardians. Even today, people from the most remote regions repeat the same rule. Do not enter where the silence begins, because silence is the first sign. Then comes the still air. Then the animals vanish. And when everything freezes, as if time itself holds its breath, that's when they say she appears. Some claim the mother of the forest protects lost children. Others swear she punishes hunters and intruders. And many believe she's simply the keeper of balance. Something neither good nor evil, just part of a much older cycle. And in the end, the question remains, does the mother of the forest really exist? Or are these stories ancient ways to remind humans of something we keep refusing to understand? That the forest is alive, it feels. And even without human eyes, it watches. Maybe, in the end, the mother of the forest isn't an entity at all. Maybe she is the forest itself, trying to warn us. Respect, or I will teach you myself.